Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to NEWSROOM. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 24th of February. It's a Friday, the end of the week, but we've got lots to discuss with you. So without further ado, this is what's going to make the headlines in tonight's NEWSROOM. Our first story concerns the EU disinfolab report. You remember it right. We've talked about it in 2019. We talked about it in 2020. We talked about it in 2021. But in 2023, this topic continues to make the headlines. Why? Because there are Indian wire agencies, there are Indian news agencies that continue to go in the direction that is opposed to any normalcy or any ethical normalcy, let's put it that way, as far as news is concerned, specifically when it concerns Pakistan. India is hell-bent on maligning Pakistan through disinformation, and this is what the EU Disinfolab's latest report on bad sources highlights. This is going to be our first story. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the relationship between Pakistan and the United States of America. There are different spheres in which both the countries are working together in order to boost their ties, to strengthen these ties. But we are going to talk about economy. Economy in the form of mangoes, economy in the form of agricultural trade, and economy in the form of information technology. These are important factors that both Syed Naveed Qamar Saab, who was in Washington, as well as Ned Price, who's talked about Pakistan and US relations, have highlighted. What is the prospect of future of our economic relationship with the United States of America? This is going to be part of our second story. And finally, we will talk about our brave rescue teams who were there in Turkey, who helped so many people come out of the rubble, who rescued so many people after the deadly earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria. And as a result of that, when they were leaving for Pakistan, they received a huge round of applause. And here also, our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif Saab and our Information Minister Maryam Aurangzeb Sahiba have lauded the role of these rescue teams, and we should also do that. Let's begin our story. Let's begin today's with our first story that concerns, of course, the EU Disinfolab report. A name that you're very familiar with, but it continues to make headlines. And now it has again made headlines because of the bad sources report that the EU Disinfolab has put out, because India continues to do what it has been doing. More in the following report.
The regional reprobate India has a wicked history of hatching conspiracies against Pakistan. India has been misleading the international community against Pakistan by fabricating false stories, distorting the incidents, and false flag operations to blame Pakistan. As part of its follow-up on two previous investigations, EU Disinfolab revealed the Asian News International, a major Indian news agency, continues to peddle disinformation using non-existent sources and ghost experts to target regional rivals, particularly Pakistan and China. The latest investigation, titled Bad Sources, exposed how Indian news agency ANI repeatedly quoted non-existent bloggers, experts, journalists, and think tanks spreading anti-Pakistan China narratives in India. Earlier, the Brussels-based EU Disinfolab uncovered a vast network of 265 coordinated fake local media outlets in 65 countries serving Indian interests, as well as the multiple dubious think tanks and NGOs. The researchers at Disinfolab revealed that despite first report and wide press coverage of the Indian disinformation operation, there was a continuation of the Indian Chronicle, even recently launched EU Chronicle, a fake EU outlet. The mischievous Indian propaganda campaign and baseless allegations against Pakistan reflects India's utter desperation emanating from its inability to break the will of Kashmiris and domestic failures. India must recognize that no amount of its false propaganda can deter Pakistan from exposing India's brutalization of the Kashmiri people through an unabated military siege.
Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, former ambassador and foreign affairs expert, joins us online. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Saab, this EU Disinfolab and its reports continue to, I shouldn't say haunt Pakistan, but rather haunt India, because they reveal the truths with facts and figures. Why are services such as ANI continuing their false propaganda, despite not once but twice being targeted by EU Disinfolab with proper facts and figures?
Well, this is basically aimed at polluting the mind of people of the world in general. Now, people with better understanding, they know that there were previous two reports of the similar kind by Disinfolab, and they had proved it with the citations that how this news agency, India, Asian news agency, is been pitched. News agencies normally they don't do that thing, but then they are basically uh, concocting all these contents, and those contents are further carried forward by the Indian media. So now that there is a proof, not once, not twice, not three times, 1999, 1920, and now there is a report by the Disinfolab as to what India has done this time. So basically, this is a very reliable organization, which is a non-governmental and non-profit organization of EU Disinfolab. It is founded in 2017, an independent one, and people, the world, they rely on it, and they basically target the bad source or the fake news. So this time also they have identified those bad sources, and what are those bad sources? Basically, that they had cited professors with given the reference of the press conference of the professors and the seminars and symposium, and those two professors do not even exist in the world, and the other two professors, they did not attend the conference. They're the four Canadian professors, they were cited, and this was one which was specifically reported by the Disinfo Lab about the ANI, what they've been doing. And then the fake media outlets basically, it's not one, it's there's so many of it, which are designed to have a network with ANI, which is the Asian News International. So they further carried forward. Now, people at large and around the world, they do not go into the authenticity of it unless they come across reports like the one which we are discussing here of the Disinfo Lab. So, if and not only that, these people who do the bad things and the wrong things, they do leave the traces and the proofs. So even the typo mistake, they could not, take it off from their scripts, and even that was also detected. So this wire services, which is ANI, they are peddling the fake news and nothing else, and basically they have targeted India, targeted Pakistan and China, their rivals basically, and that has been identified not by us, not by China, but by the European, by an organization which is based in Brussels, which is in the European Union, Disinfo Lab. So they have identified it. Now, what is to be done from here onward? That is more important
But
because if
in 2019, when they came out with their first report, a very detailed report talking about more than 200 sites that were giving false news, fake news about Pakistan, whether it be concerning our minorities, whether it be concerning Pakistan in general, bad mouthing Pakistan through these websites. The world got to know about it. Then in 2020, Indian Chronicles came out, and then now the bad sources report comes out from the EU Disinfo Lab report, citing again the involvement of the Srivastava group directly or indirectly. Is the world not reacting the way it should? Aren't the important journalistic organizations, international ones, going to react this time properly and ban all such elements that are, backing themselves on fake news, on false news?
there's some point beyond this. As a matter of fact, last time also Disinfo Lab, through their investigation, had identified more than 720 or 750 fake accounts through which all this propaganda was disseminated by the Indians, and that was orchestrated by Indian intelligence agencies and other organizations. So that was identified. But the bigger question is whether that was made known to the people, the general people around the world, and those who matter. In fact, there should have been some efforts through the affected parties such as China and Pakistan, and others who believe in the media independence. In fact, the InfoLab has also criticized the journalist who picked this news from this news agency, from this wire agency. They have
But
criticized those
isn't this the
journalists.
basic aim of ANI? So that other news agencies pick up their news and disperse it internationally, and continue to propagate this agenda of India against Pakistan.
That's right, but this is what the disinfolab is indicating in its report, that the real journalists, the people who call themselves journalists, should at least see prima facie the veracity of such news disseminated by the wire this wire agency. So they have also been very candid in indicating that there is a think tank, and that think tank name is IFRAS,
That is also
IFRAS,
linked to the
IFRAS.
Srivastava group. Remember the same Srivastava group that
That's
was
a,
also linked in
exactly.
2019.
Mm. And then they mentioned that this was dissolved in 2014, and after its dissolution they are quoting it now, and the news being picked through this reference of IFRAS, the at least twice a week ANI is making that reference and peddling the false news and the new bad source news, rather false news. Bad source news could be done ignorantly, but that's, and then
But you talk
having
of ignorance. I'd like to understand, do the journalists who work with the ANI understand what they are doing, what they are involved in? Do they continue with such ethical routines as journalists? Shouldn't they? I don't know. I just find this so incredible.
That's right. The journalists who have their name around the world, they would, or if they know it, and if they don't know it, they normally try to find out. And after this kind of revelation, after this kind of the investigation, I think the journalists worth the name would not continue to work with ANI and an organization like this. But there are a whole lot of all categories of people and all categories of journalists who go for some other benefits. So they would continue, but otherwise, there could have been some benefit of doubts until these three reports were published. Now, these three reports were published and peddled through 720 outlets. They were located in various part of the world. And from there, they were trying to do that. And they continued doing it for several years unless they were caught. Unless they were caught,
The
and they
750 media outlets, Dr. Saab, came in the 2020 Indian Chronicles, the details of that. But it was in 2019 that it talked about these 265 different websites that were pertaining to disseminating fake or false information. What has been Pakistan's stance? How has Pakistan reacted since, in your point of view, diplomatically or otherwise as well? And what should now Pakistan do now that the third report has come out?
No, since this is approved, the following things could be done, following steps could be taken. First of all, through the public diplomacy, through the real media outreach, Pakistan and Pakistan's mission and Pakistan's outlet, they should be able to cite this report and let the world know that what India is doing, and they are maligning the whole media industry around the world, the way the news are picked up. And not only that, they are maligning the reputable institutions like Montreal University, its professors. By name, they are maligning them, that they attended, and from that, they generate a source, and then with that reference, they start peddling their information or peddling their news. So, what Pakistan can do is to approach those universities and through its missions and inform them that, look, this is what is happening around, and your professors are losing their credibility. So they should sue them in those respective countries where such names were used and such renowned think tanks were, the name of those renowned think tanks, the name of certain NGOs were used, the name of certain think tanks were used So
Let's
all,
talk
in fact,
about
we
one
see.
of the major organizations, that is the Srivastava Group, whose name surfaced in 2019 and it is still surfacing in 2023 because it's related to IFRAS, the organization that has been linked, the think tank that has been talked about in this bad sources report. 116 countries in which the Srivastava Group is operating, and of course it has used its influence to disseminate such fake information. What has, in your point of view, because you understand diplomacy much better than people like myself do, what has been the reaction from the European Union since 2019 in your point of view, and what should the reaction now be from the EU after this third report?
No, the EU, since it's not a governmental organization, but since this NGO is quite, this non-governmental organization is quite well reputed, as I said, based in Belgium. So,
Hmm.
based on this, at least they have come up with the evidence and the proof, and those evidence and proof has been tabled at the soil of the European Union. So European Union can always take it up through the following means. One, that they could raise it in the United Nations. Two, that they could directly protest it with India. And three, they do the dissemination of this report and they bring the awareness among the people living in European Union and elsewhere. So these 3 points, they are morally, in fact, morally they should do it because the investigation has proved it. And if they have any doubt about this organization, which is disinfolab, then they could institute, and it becomes incumbent upon the respective governments to at least probe in as to why their soil is being, why such disinformation is landing, fake information is landing in their territory, and they could always take it up. Now, what Pakistan and China can do it, Pakistan and China jointly could rely on this report and connect it with other reports, like what
Hmm.
report has been published by the Human Rights
Of course,
Commission,
because not only
even
Pakistan but
for
China is also being targeted by this report, and it is evident what the basic intention behind it is, to disinform the public with fake news, with false news, to bring a bad name to both of these countries. Is it also not a deliberate tactic by the agencies in India or the government, indirectly or directly, to divert attention from what is happening in actuality within India, within the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir region?
No, there is no doubt about that because that is orchestrated at the government level. This is part of the intelligence operation. It is part of raw operation. So there is a purpose, and the purpose obviously is to deflect the attention of all these human rights violations, all the war crimes which has been happening in India. So they want to deflect that attention, and they further try to deflect this attention and assert their diplomatic outreach in at various international forums. So they use this propaganda, they use this wrong dissemination of information, and then they try and prove their point that this is all what is happening in India is a propaganda against them, and it's in fact it's happening somewhere else. So they try. What happens is that whatever resolution is passed or whatever agenda is tabled at the General Assembly level or at the Security Council level, the respective government and respective representatives who table the agenda, or even for that matter at the Human Rights Council, uh, the countries who table those agendas have all these factors, their bottom-up pressure of their public, that is one factor. Second factor is the foreign policy, and foreign policy is also having a driving factor of their public sentiments. So if the public sentiments becomes, say, if they buy this such news of ANI, then obviously they will not assert pressure on their respective government. And once they table some agenda or once they go to the United Nations, they would not really be going against Indian narrative. So it's a complete complex diplomatic intelligence mechanism, So they are one
In this
side, they are trying
complex
to.
diplomatic and intelligence mechanism, let's also talk about the real information that is being disseminated about India through the documentary of the BBC, through other facts and figures, through the documentary proof that Pakistan has also provided to the international community through facts and figures. And we've discussed that in the past as well with you, in fact, as guests. What's very interesting is that Google in December last year launched an anti-misinformation campaign in India, because apparently the Indians say, oh, there's so much misinformation against our country that is being disseminated, and important social media platforms need to do something about it. We also remember how India put forward new laws that curbed the dissemination of true facts and figures through documentaries such as that published by the BBC on the different social media platforms like YouTube, like Twitter. On the one hand, there is misinformation that is being propagated by India. On the other hand, when there is true information that concerns India, they are blocking all such attempts for people to understand or to get hold of this information. How do you see this hypocrisy within India?
No, as I said, that they are doing it as part of their foreign policy achievement of targets. So once they are doing that, whether we will call it a hypocrisy, they would call it as part of the strategy to achieve their foreign policy objectives. So, but the world at least should not turn the blind eyes on it. We have furnished 137 pages of dossier in the United Nations and cited all the facts and figures and evidence how India is involved in the region, including how the operation is conducted in Pakistan through various means, using Afghanistan territory and using our neighboring country territory. So we have given it already in that. But more important, what we have given, we could be cited as the rivals of India, and we are. But basically, the Human Rights Commission, they are an independent body and organization comprises of the international the representatives and members of member countries. What evidence they have cited, even that evidence could not be translated and transformed into Security Council agenda and the General Assembly agenda. That is where the world is turning its blind eye because of their variety of interests, maybe a trade interest, maybe their geostrategic interest, and various other interests, blended with what India is doing through its ANI and through its other mechanism to address this multilateral and multidimensional aspects of their foreign policy. And to some extent, they are still trying to deflect the attention of the world community. But then, if the world community is made to realize with the affected parties, in this case, China and Pakistan in particular, and if the world is made to realize about the Human Rights Commission reports, two reports, very serious reports, volumetric reports, and which was presented through the press conferences of the Human Rights Commissioner. So if those things are then coupled with each other, and then the world is able to made to understand this through various mechanisms, and that is through the public diplomacy, through the legal diplomacy, and through the traditional diplomacy. So in that case, perhaps we'll be able to make a point, and the world would be able to understand that, and then they would react only at the once the bottoms of pressure in those respective countries it is asserted. Those respective countries would then react.
All
And
right, final
likewise, if
question, Ambassador Sir, final question. You said we need to make a point. Don't you feel the role of the Pakistani media, whether it be social media, traditional media, or the newspapers, its role becomes all the more important in the wake of such reports to also become more proactive and aggressive as far as highlighting all this that India is perpetrating against our country?
I think it's their professional and ethical responsibility to do it. Regardless, government may not say anything about it, but it's not the government domain. The media has its own independence. But then it's their professional and ethical responsibility
Because this
to
is
at
a
least call
national
a spade
cause.
a
This is
spade
a
a
national
spade.
cause for which
Uh,
all
uh,
media needs to be on one
to
page.
That's right. National cause, definitely. All entities located in this territory of Pakistan should work for the national cause. What I'm saying is that more plausible or logical that it's even their professional cause and actually their ethical cause. So if they are refraining to peddle or to propel the national cause for whatever reasons, I won't say that they are refraining, but at least they should just have their professional and ethical responsibilities to call
I
a
totally agree
spade.
with you. Professional ethical responsibility needs to be across the board, whether it be our media, whether it be our social media, whether it be our Twitter. Instead of highlighting other things, I think we need to highlight national causes and be on Pakistan's side, strengthen Pakistan's resolve nationally and internationally. Thank you very much, Jamil Ahmed Khan Saab, to have joined us, to have talked to us about this latest edition of the EU Disinfolab report titled Bad Sources, that again talks about the role of the ANI and the role of the Srivastava Group, IFRAS, and so much more in order to malign Pakistan as well as China. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns a robust relationship between the United States and Pakistan that is now developing in different spheres. It has been highlighted by Ned Price while talking to media very recently. The desire to further strengthen cooperation with Pakistan, and also Syed Naveed Qamar Saab, who is in Washington, has been highlighting that different aspects of our trade relations that need to be strengthened, whether it be in the form of exporting mangoes, whether it be in the form of seeking renewal of US tariff waiver, whether it be agriculture or IT as products that could further strengthen our trade relations. More in the following report.
The United States and Pakistan have a robust partnership based on decades of bilateral cooperation and support. In order to bolster bilateral relationship in trade and investment, Pakistan and the United States have relaunched the Trade and Investment Framework Agreement process. TIFA mechanism provides a structure to both the governments to engage in future trade and investment, and the two sides held their first ministerial level meeting of TIFA in 7 years. US Trade Representative Ambassador Catherine Tai hosted Commerce Minister Syed Naveed Qamar and his team for talks on the US-Pakistan Trade and Investment Framework Agreement. The talks focused on seeking greater access to the IT market in the US for Pakistani products and professionals. Pakistan is also seeking to expand its agricultural exports to the United States. Reiterating US commitment to deepen our economic and commercial ties, the US State Department spokesperson Ned Price has emphasized that a robust trade relationship between the United States and Pakistan is important to bolster Pakistan's economic stability. Ned Price pointed out that the US investment in Pakistan is the highest it's been in over a decade, and US corporations have announced more than $1.5 billion in investment plans in Pakistan since 2019. Pakistan is looking for the breakthroughs and talks on the US-Pakistan Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, since the US remains the largest export market for Pakistani goods with a bilateral trade volume of $12 billion.
We've been joined by Dr. Usman W. Chohan. He's a political economist and, of course, a regular on our shows. Thank you very much, Usman, to have joined us. Usman, so much is happening on the Pak-US front, and it's heartening to see that finally the US is warming up to Pakistan, and we might see a strengthening of relations in different spheres. The TIFA ministerial meeting, let's talk about it first of all. In the whole context of the media briefing that was given by Ned Price, I would like to quote what he said as far as the ambit of relationship that could be looked into as far as Pak-US collaboration is concerned. He said, and I quote, "We believe there is great potential to expand bilateral trade with Pakistan, particularly in energy, agricultural equipment and products, franchising, retail trade, information and communications technology products and services." This is not bad as a starting list.
It's not bad at all. It's actually a very significant list. Best way to think about it is to break it into two parts, the trade side and the investment side. The trade side is very important for us because we have a significant trade volume, we mentioned in your report of 12 billion, which is in our favor. We have a surplus, and we don't always have a surplus with countries that are trading partners, so that's very good. And the things that we export to them, we have now an opportunity to move higher up in the value chain. Then there's the investment side. And on the investment side, it would be very nice. The areas you listed are very important for that. The other thing is, as the world, which is to say Europe and the US in particular, are diversifying their supply chains away from China, countries such as Pakistan, but not only Pakistan, have a unique opportunity now to seize various tiers of the value chain. And the more of that and the higher up of that we can gain, the better. So when we negotiate this TIFA, Trade Investment Framework Agreement, it should be with a state of mind that we have a new opportunity and we can cover a lot of the value chain at this time.
All right, let's talk also about the information technology. Syed Naveed Kamar Saab has been quoted as far as suggestions that include as far as the greater IT and tech cooperation with the US that is being sought by Pakistan is concerned, amplification of tax regime for IT businesses, training, capacity building of IT professionals, simplified transactions, introduction of IT subjects in schools and colleges, and better interministerial coordination. Important steps?
Absolutely. And the two that are most important are the ones that go into the human capital portion, which is to say training the IT professionals and encouraging IT courses. Because as you well know, as all of us well know, there is a lot of IT talent in Pakistan, and oftentimes they have to spearhead initiatives in their own with their own limited wherewithal, and therefore they cannot scale up quickly. And that means that Pakistan advances along the IT value chain slowly compared to other Asian countries. So our exports are at 2 billion in IT. Other countries may be up to 100 billion. That means that there is a lot to do. And the other thing is that in the value chain of IT exports in the services side, so not hardware, but on the services side, we are quite far down, which is to say that it's the stuff that AI would probably replace in 5 to 10 years anyways, which is scary. So to push that,
we are seeing through Chat GPT and others how that could be scary enough.
Yes, exactly right.
But Dr. Saab, I'd like to understand also something. This TIFA meeting that is happening after a period of 7 years, do you feel it could lead to a breakthrough as far as trade relations between our two countries is concerned? How optimistic are you?
Well, I wouldn't say breakthrough, but breakthroughs, which is to say that you would have several different advancements, because we're looking at it in a multi-pronged manner, and so are the Americans. It's a very good thing, because Pakistan in this current geopolitical environment strongly believes, wisely, that we should have good economic relations with the US and China, the two major economic powers. China has always been encouraging and mature about that, but America has seen this a lot as a zero sum in the past. But now they're warming up to it. They have a different worldview, which includes an Indo-Pacific strategy, as they call it, but we call it Asia-Pacific. And so as their worldview changes, there are favorable prospects for Pakistan to have a more economic-based relationship rather than a geopolitical security stuff, which is actually destructive for society in the longer run.
Usman, what measures in your point of view could Pakistan now take, now that this relationship is building up, is warming up, the US is warming up to Pakistan in different spheres? What can now Pakistan do to enhance bilateral trade between our country and the US? Because the US is a very, very important partner.
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. I think it's the most important question, because if I were to recommend it to you, the recommendation would be the same for all countries we trade with, which is above all quality control, which is that the things that are produced, manufactured, or serviced through Pakistan should be of a high standardized quality compatible with international standards. It's not always that we conform to them. And if you cut corners in this, ultimately the buyer gets disappointed, and there is a lot of competition there. This is something for us to work on our own. It's a work ethic issue, but it's also a regulatory oversight issue, because not everybody will conform. So sometimes you need to have somebody above making sure. Quality control is the most thing, so that the American buyer develops a relationship with us, and the American seller also. But I'm not worried about American quality. I'm worried about our quality, right?
Now, one of the many topics that are going to be and have been part of this discussion under the TIFA, the ambit of TIFA is possible further cooperation, market access issues, labor, environment, protection, enforcement of intellectual property rights is what you talked about, and capacity building. Easy to achieve from the Pakistani side?
It is. It is. It does take hard work, but it's not difficult to achieve. The best arbitrage strategy in this would be that you take firms which are facing restrictions, such as, for example, Chinese firms, but they're part of the supply chain here, and then you do it with your connectivity doctrine. You see it in that light, and then things go to America, or Pakistan offers the market access to Central Asia, which has been highlighted in the press as well, to Central Asia and to the region for American goods. So better integration is very key here. And it is easy to do, but it requires, first of all, continuity of policy, and second, a bit of focus that, economics really matters. And with the current economic circumstances, I'm glad to see that people are starting to awaken to the reality of what economics means.
All right. Also, Usman, I'd like to now focus a little bit on the information technology sector, because that's an important sector. There are countries that are, making billions and trillions out of it with because of their collaboration with the US. And why should Pakistan be behind all of that? We've got extremely talented IT individuals, professionals. As Net Price also says, and I quote, US companies and their local affiliates are among Pakistan's largest employers, with roughly 80 US companies directly employing more than 120,000 Pakistani. Why can't more such companies under the ambit of the IT work with Pakistan? Also, I'd like to refer to what Commerce Minister Sayyid Naveed Qamar Saab said, that better facilities and the right policies could lead to exponential growth in the IT sector. What should be the roadmap?
The roadmap should be, first, working on the infrastructure, which we're already quite good at. So we are one of the countries that is best poised to go for 5G. So having the infrastructure ready. And the second is the policy continuity. You see, the taxation regime here, for example, has penalized many of our IT people, and so they have sought to move abroad or go to the freelance instead. This is very bad. A lot of our IT people are actually based out of the Gulf now. This you can't have. You need to have them work in Pakistan and give them the freedom to be sustainable economically rather than jump on them with the tax regime, which is very unproductive. So the policy continuity is second. And the third is building long-term relationships. American corporations are very, very serious, and you may get the impression that they think quarter to quarter, but this is actually not true. They do set out long-term plans, they do have a competitive spirit, and they are answerable to shareholders. That means that they need people around the world who are as serious as them. And this seriousness is much better ingrained in our IT sector. Why? Because many of our best people in IT actually learned their trade, honed their skills in Silicon Valley or in Toronto or somewhere else, and brought that work ethic back. So we have a huge advantage already. And so it's time to take it off, because 2 billion is a little bit too small. I would hope for something like 20 to 30 billion in IT exports, because this is the future. The value added of the future is intellectual property. So we have to respect intellectual property, and design, which is a creativity thing. And you and I know how creative our society is, but perhaps not always in the productive sense. So we have to foster this creativity in our youth, that they can see and then take advantage of new opportunities. Because so far in history, in our IT, normally we've taken a business model abroad and then just adopted it here. For example, the Uber in a local form, right? So that's, or the microfinance in the local form. This is not creative. You're just applying this model. And of course, that is what China did initially too. But now China is in many ways competing with the United States at the cutting edge of what, for example, TikTok, right? So now we have to stop from the imitation part to advancing the boundary, and there is no stopping you once you are in a creative state of mind, anticipating.
That is, I have the Pakistan stamp, in fact, on it, as originating in Pakistan or fabricated in Pakistan, which reminds me of Pakistani mangoes. Pakistan has been trying a lot to export its mangoes to the US as a proper, agricultural export, but it has not yet, received the exact, the necessary response as far as the export quantity that Pakistan wants to send it to the United States of America. How can the US be a promising market for Pakistan's agricultural exports? What needs to be done?
Oh, this is a very fascinating case study, because our mangoes are the tastiest in the world. There's an enormous variety of them too, about 200 to 300 varieties. It's remarkable. And yet, it's the Mexican mangoes that dominate in the American market. Part of
Why?
that Part
Why?
of that, oh, well, good question. Part of that is the transport cost, right? It's just a truck from across the Rio Grande, as opposed to shipping, which will take 12 days. And so there's a transport cost thing. But the second is the branding. Not all mango exporters have maintained quality assurance. And second, they haven't been good on the marketing side. So if you target it as a premium mango, as opposed to the standard staple like you want an exotic fruit in your Krugers, then you will succeed because the Pakistani mango being the best mango, which it is easy to market and it should be done. Otherwise, if you compete with the Brazilian or the Mexican mango just as something, a summertime snack, you won't get very far because Mexican mangoes are all right, you see?
That is so true, and I've had the chance to taste some of them, and nothing compares to Pakistani mangoes. I can assure you of that, Usman, and I'm sure you agree with me on that as well. Whereas the US side wants to boost the exports of beef and soybeans, Pakistan is also looking towards pharmaceuticals. Could this be a sector that the US could be interested in the near future from Pakistan's side?
Yes, but this is a tricky industry, because the developing world has excelled in the generics, which is to say that the patent has expired and so you can do the low-cost manufacturing. And there's many patents because a lot of innovation in medicine happened in the mid-20th century or the three quarters through the 20th century, and those patents aren't there anymore. And that's where countries in Asia have really succeeded. But as far as new variants, new development, R&D goes, the costs are very high, and the Americans will always maintain the advantage in that, and so will the Europeans. So as far as big pharma goes, our way to succeed would be by focusing on the generic side, but then we have to look at the competition and the volumes, and that is a very serious challenge. I mean, there are very, very big Goliaths in Asia in generic pharma, so it's a tricky industry.
All right, but there's something that you mentioned in the very beginning, and that was Pakistan helping diversify US supply chains. That is something also that Pakistan could easily do. What's your point of view on that?
Absolutely. It's a question of the volume and the transportation. As far as the infrastructure goes, you could literally have it in to the port and out. And some countries excel in that. Bangladesh, for example, excels that things come in and they go out immediately, and they gain a nice cut out of that. That is one way to work around this. The other thing is in terms of competition for the downgrading of the Chinese supply chains. There are very, very serious competitors, Vietnam being in the lead, because Vietnam has laid out a framework and policy continuity that is excellent. It has in many ways imitated what China did in the 90s, but done it even better. The thing is that the Japanese economists used to call it the flying geese theory. So there would be one lead Asian country and it would become too labor uncompetitive because wages are so high because it has become rich, and then two more geese and two more geese and two more geese. The thing is, many Asian countries would now be considered developed countries, and so there aren't too many geese. So you have this advantage where you could be labor cost competitive. But the thing is, 10 years down the road, I would like us to think a little long term. 10 years down the road, labor will not be the competitive advantage in the cost structure. It'll actually be transport. And that's why trading with the near economies and the US using Pakistan through the market mechanism to sell here would be advantageous to them and advantageous to us. So the supply chain is characterized by competition, but the other thing is labor cost is not always the advantage.
I understand, but we can work around that nevertheless. One thing I'd like to understand, on Monday, Pakistan urged US lawmakers to expedite the legislation for the renewal of the GSP. There is a GSP as far as the US is concerned, but of course that has not been renewed. Contrary to GSP Plus, that is also in the phase of renewal as far as Pakistan and the EU is concerned. Pakistan is also one of the 10 beneficiaries of the program. How optimistic are you that this could be renewed?
I am optimistic that it will be renewed. This is a kind of double-edged sword. You see, GSP means that you are favored because your conditions need to be made better. I would much rather we not depend on such trade arrangements, that are almost sympathetic. I would rather we be so prosperous We don't need this sort of thing. But as far as it helping our exporters, it's very positive. It's taken very seriously. And right now, our export markets, our exporters are really struggling in terms of the energy, in terms of the labor, in terms of getting things done right now. So if they get a boost from this, first of all, let's make sure that they're able to fulfill the orders. They did a very good job during COVID. Let's make sure that they can do a good job this time again. But given the challenges that they are facing and the dispiritedness I've remarked among them, I hope that they are able to, even if GSP is approved, fulfill the orders.
I really hope so, and I feel that Pakistan is really gearing towards, coming up to the US expectations as far as bolstering of the trade and economic ties is concerned. And we have ties in so many other fields, defense as well, counter-terrorism, that is going to be discussed next month as well. So I just feel there's this little sixth sense that is saying that we might actually, after a couple of years, now see a robust relationship between Pakistan and the US, and I hope you agree with me on that.
I do agree with you, and let's not forget that the United States, even though its relationship with the world economy has diminished compared to 1945, it is still important. It is still at the cutting edge. It still has the best human capital. It's still going to lead the march of economic progress in the world. So to think that they're offsetting countries, that only goes so far. So to have a positive relationship with the United States that is multifaceted is important, and it should be based on respect on both sides and a desire to foster co-prosperity. And the tenor of the meetings that I'm getting right now in TIFA and all is very positive, that both sides have come around to a more mature view of a global prosperity in the post-COVID era.
All right, fingers crossed, Usman. Thank you so very much, Dr. Usman W. Chohan, political economist, talking to us and, of course, discussing the future of Pak-US ties in the whole context of all these meetings that are happening, especially TIFA. And, of course, the result of all these meetings seems to be very, very positive, with also net price highlighting that in his media brief. Let's end with our rescue teams that were there in Turkey and have made an extraordinary effort to help those in need. We have seen the devastation caused in Turkey and in Syria as a result of this 7.8 magnitude earthquake, and then recently another 6.4 magnitude earthquake that shook Turkey as well as Syria. Our teams went there, our teams made headlines, our teams helped those in need. They took out people from the rubble after days of being under this devastation, and managed to get so much of accolades and so much of du'as, let's put it that way, from the people, from our brethren in Turkey. Our Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, also has paid tribute to these teams for saving their lives in this quake-hit Turkey by sharing a proud and heartwarming sight of Rescue 1122's team returning home after completing the rescue operation in Turkey. If you can see this video right in the parallel screens, they are being at the airport in Turkey, and they are being showered with a lot of praise and accolades for all the hard work that they did to help the people in Turkey. Our Information Minister, Maryam Aurangzeb, has also lauded the role of Rescue 1122 in the relief operation in the quake-hit Turkey. This is something that we need to be proud of. We as a nation are always there for our brothers and for our people as well. We've seen the resilience that our people have. We've seen how we've gone from one devastation after the other, but have still stood strong. Not only have helped ourselves, but also our brethren in need. This resolve needs to continue. Have a great weekend. We'll see you inshallah on Monday.